So today we're going over triangle proofs and CPCTC. So remember that stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, okay? So let's do a couple examples. So here's number one, and we have a picture. Make sure that you're always copying down the diagram. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it will help us figure out which parts are congruent. So I have ABC and then ACD. And here's what we're given. I'm going to tell you that AB is congruent to AD. AB is congruent to AD. And then also BC is congruent to CD. And we're going to use this information to prove this. We're going to prove that angle BCA is congruent to angle DCA. So if you check out what we're proving, our end goal is not to say that the two triangles are congruent, but it's to say angles within those two triangles are congruent. So we will have to prove the triangles congruent along the way and then go from there. So let's look at, we have statements, as always, and then reasons. All right, let's look at our givens. So first I have AB is congruent to AD, and that's given. And that's really important, and I'm going to show that in my diagram. AB is congruent to AD. All right, next step, step 2. I've got BC is congruent to CD. So BC is congruent to CD. All right. And that's also given. Now looking at our picture, we should notice that AC is a shared side, so we can say that that is congruent to itself by the reflexive property. So step 3, we're going to say that AC is congruent to AC because of the reflexive property. So with this being said, I have 1, 2, 3 pairs of congruent sides. So this is enough to tell us by side, side, side that ABC and ADC are congruent. So that's our next step. Triangle ABC is congruent to triangle ADC. And that's great, but that's not the end. Our proof is going to end saying that the angle BCA, and here is BCA, so right here, we want to say that BCA is congruent to DCA, so that, right? And we are allowed to say that because let's look at these two triangles, ABC, ADC, BCA, right here, is that a corresponding part? Is that a corresponding angle to ADC? Is it? Yeah, it is, because it's in between these two congruent sides. All right, so those angles are corresponding. So by corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, by that we are allowed to say that since BCA and DCA are corresponding, and since the triangles are congruent, their angles are congruent. BCA angle is congruent to the angle DCA. All right, we'll do one more, so number 2, and we're going to have something that looks like this. And we've got P, Q, R, S, and I'm going to tell you that. All right, so let's look at our given. So I've already kind of showed you part of the given. The given is that PS is parallel to QR. All right. And then I'm also going to tell you that the angle QPS is congruent to angle SRQ. All right, let's add that to the picture. So angle QPS right there is congruent to SRQ. So remember this middle letter, that's always the vertex of the angle. Okay. All right, we're going to prove this. We want to prove that PQ is congruent to RS. Okay. Statements, reasons. All right, so let's make sure I noted everything. QPS is there and SRQ is there, and now these lines are parallel. So we have two given statements. All right, so the first one I'm going to say PS is parallel to QR, although it's the same thing. And then angle QPS is congruent to angle SRQ. All right. So let's look at what we can get from step 1. PS is parallel to RQ. So PS parallel to RQ. I like to extend my lines. You don't have to, though. All right. If they're parallel, then we can look at the angles that are formed by those two parallel lines and the transversal. So I'm looking at this, and that transversal, and any angles formed by that. Well, this angle is formed, and that angle is formed. So because of this, we can say that angle PSQ is congruent to angle RQS. Okay. And that's because they're alternate interior angles. Alternate interior angles. All right, so I've got an angle, and then this side, that side's itself. So QS is congruent to QS, and that's just through the reflexive property. All right. So this is enough to say by angle, side, that these two triangles are congruent. So in the 5th step, we can say by angle, side, that these triangles QPS is congruent to triangle SRQ. But that's not our final goal. Remember, our final goal is to prove that PQ is congruent to RS. Well, why would we be allowed to do that? PQ is congruent to RS because these are congruent triangles. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. RS and PQ are corresponding parts. So there we go. PQ is congruent to RS by CPCTC. And that's it.